The whistle cut through the evening air like a rusted blade. Two short, one long. The same one I'd used when I was 12 years old, the same one Duke had answered with his heart hammering against my legs as he thundered up the stairs. But Duke was gone, and I was no longer 12. I was 29, desert dust still ground beneath my fingernails, a scar on my knee that reminded me every morning that the ground could explode without warning. I also had a house, no, a sanctuary where dogs that others had broken learned to trust again. And I had Shadow, sitting beside me on the porch, his mutilated ear swiveling toward the sound of the whistle, as if he recognized something I barely remembered. The whistle came from the woods, from the side of the property where there shouldn't be anyone. I had arrived at Duke's Run 3 years earlier, with Shadow barely recovered from surgery on his blind eye and a medical discharge check that couldn't heal what was truly broken. I bought 40 acres of land nobody wanted, too rocky, too remote, too silent, and built what I needed, not a quick adoption shelter, but a place where dogs could unlearn fear. The first residents arrived in metal cages. Pit bulls with bite scars on their necks, a Belgian shepherd who had smelled too many bombs and now trembled when the wind changed direction, a Labrador who had been trained with electric wires until he forgot that human hands could caress. Shadow was the first. Shadow was the teacher, not because he was the strongest. He limped when it rained, and his peripheral vision was almost non-existent, but because he had been in the darkest place and chosen to come out. He had been sold to die in a fighting ring as a puppy, survived 3 years of pain, and still, when I extended my hand for the first time, he didn't bite me. He sniffed, waited, and then slowly, like someone returning a treasure they had kept for themselves, he laid his head in my palm. That was what he taught the others. That trust is not demanded, it is offered, and that offering it after everything is not weakness. The whistle sounded again. Closer this time, Shadow stood up. He didn't growl, he never growled without reason, never attacked without command, but his body tensed into that perfect line between alert and calm that only dogs who have learned to trust their instinct can maintain. Stay, I murmured. It wasn't a command of obedience. It was a promise. Stay with me. Don't go. Don't rush toward what we don't know. I walked toward the woods. The earth crunched beneath my boots, the same ones I'd worn in Afghanistan, risoled, with soles worn by terrain that didn't want to be walked. Twilight stained the pines a sickly orange, and the air smelled of rain that wouldn't come. She was at the edge of the stream, a girl. No, a teenager, 13, maybe 14 years old, with jeans torn at the knees and a hoodie 3 sizes too big that made her look like a wounded animal trying to appear larger than it was. She had a leash in her hand. Empty, and eyes that I recognized before she spoke. Those eyes had been in my mirror. How did you get in here? I asked. My voice came out rougher than I intended. There's a hole in the fence, on the north side. Her voice was a murmur, as if speaking at normal volume was a luxury she couldn't afford. I saw it when I passed by on my bike, and the whistle, she looked down. The leash hung from her fingers like a question without an answer. My dog, his name was Rusty, a German shepherd, my dad. She stopped, swallowed. The sound was audible in the silence of the woods. My dad says dogs are tools, that if they don't obey, they're useless. I felt the air thicken. Felt the past, my past, the 12-year-old girl at the window, the bleeding hands in frozen earth materialize between the trees like smoke. Where's Rusty now? In the backyard. Tied to the clothesline pole. Her voice cracked, but she didn't cry. Those who learn early not to cry in front of those who can use it against them know how to hold tears until they are alone. He says tomorrow he'll take him to the vet. That he'll put him down because he bit my little brother. But Rusty didn't bite, he just growled. My brother pulled his tail and Rusty growled, that's all. Shadow appeared at my side. I hadn't called him. Sometimes he simply knew when his presence was needed. The girl saw him, his shredded ear, his milky eye, his body marked by scars that told stories she seemed to understand without words, and something in her face broke differently. Not with fear, with recognition. He too, she started. Yes, I said, him too. Her name was Luna. She told me as we walked back to the house, Shadow ahead of us like a sentinel who needed no orders. She told me she lived 3 kilometers away, in the last house before the asphalt turned to dirt road, that her mother had died 2 years earlier, cancer. She said, with the flat voice of someone who has repeated the words so many times they no longer know if they believe it, and that her father had been a Marine like mine. He says coal women are soldiers, I said without thinking. The words left my mouth as if they had been waiting 13 years to be spoken aloud. Luna stopped, looked at me. And for the first time, I saw something that wasn't fear in her eyes. It was something more dangerous. It was hope. "You're Willow?" she asked. "The one with the sanctuary? My biology teacher talked about you. She said you rescue dogs from fighting rings, that you heal them." "I don't heal them," I corrected. "I teach them that not all humans hurt. The rest they do on their own." We reached the house. The porch lights turned on automatically, illuminating the yard where dogs who had already learned to trust slept in their kennels or played in the enclosures. Luna watched them, and I saw her hand clench the empty leash so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Can you save Rusty?" The question came out as a whisper, as if asking for help was an act of betrayal. I didn't answer immediately, because the question wasn't just about Rusty. It was about her. About whether I could save her too. About whether I, who had buried Duke with bleeding hands, who had spent years feeding my father's paranoia until he crumbled, who had learned that patience can be a sharper weapon than any knife, was ready to be what my mother couldn't be for me. "I can't promise I'll save Rusty," I finally said. "But I can promise he won't die alone. And I can promise you something else." Luna looked at me, waiting. "I can teach you to whistle." That night, Luna slept on the sofa in the common room. I didn't ask her father's permission. There was no phone number I wanted to dial, no voice on the other end that deserved to hear mine, and she didn't offer to call. Simply, for the first time in who knows how long, she slept without watching the door. I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch with Shadow at my feet, looking at the woods where I had found the girl who was me, and thought about Duke. About how he had answered my whistle that last night, knowing, do dogs know? Do they sense danger in the tone of our voice? That something was wrong. About how he had placed his body between my father and me, not knowing that the price of his loyalty would be the picnic table, and the hunting knife, and my hands burying him in earth that refused to yield. "It wasn't your fault," I whispered to the darkness. I had said it thousands of times. I would keep saying it until my bones turned to dust, and the wind carried the words to wherever good dogs go when they die. Shadow lifted his head, looked at me with his one good eye, and in that gaze was something that needed no translation. "I know, you know too, now help her know." Dawn broke gray. The kind of morning that seems designed to hide what you don't want to see. Luna ate breakfast in silence, scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice that she looked at as if she couldn't remember the last time someone had prepared something for her without expecting anything in return, and then followed me to the training yard. "The whistle isn't to call the dog," I explained, taking the metal whistle that hung from my neck. The same one I'd used in the army, the same one I'd used with my dogs in the desert, the same one that now hung over my heart like a medal no one had given me. "The whistle is to tell the dog that you're here, that you didn't abandon them, that if they come it won't be into a trap." Luna took the whistle. Her hands trembled, "And if they don't come, then you keep whistling, until they learn that your sound means safety, or until you learn that some dogs, like some people, need more time than others to believe again." We practiced for an hour, 2 short, 1 long. Luna had dry lips and the sound came out uneven, but she improved. Shadow, sitting to one side, wagged his tail every time she got the rhythm right, as if approving the lesson. Then the phone rang. It was Sheriff Morales, a man who knew my story, not all of it, but enough to not ask unnecessary questions when I'd registered the sanctuary, and who now sounded uncomfortable on the other end of the line. "Willow, there's a man at the station. Says his daughter disappeared last night. 13 years old. Luna Vargas." The last name hit me like a punch to the stomach. Vargas, the same name that had appeared in my mother's diaries, the name of the man who had bought Shadow for the fighting ring, the name that had haunted my nightmares like an echo that wouldn't silence. "What's the father's name?" "Carlos Vargas, ex-Marine. Says the girl ran away, that she's prone to fantasy, that she's been talking about a dog sanctuary, about a woman filling her head with ideas." I looked at Luna, who had stopped practicing and now watched me with wide eyes. With fear, yes, but also with something more. With the silent determination of someone who has decided they won't go back. "Carlos Vargas isn't just a worried father, Sheriff. He's the man who sold dogs to fighting rings for years. The man my mother mentioned in her diaries before she died." Silence on the other end. "Then, do you have proof?" "I have his daughter. And I have a dog he sold to die, sitting at my side." Another pause. When Morales spoke again, his voice had changed. It was firmer. "Colder, don't do anything until I get there. I'm 20 minutes out, and Willow, yes, don't let that man onto your property, not without me." I hung up. Luna was looking at me and I knew she had heard enough. "My dad." She started, then stopped, reformed. "Carlos, he wasn't always like this. Before Mom died, he was different, softer, but after he started drinking, saying the world had gone weak, that he needed to teach us strength. Cruelty isn't strength, I said, it's fear in disguise. Luna nodded, but she didn't seem convinced, or perhaps she simply wasn't ready to believe it yet. That was okay. Trust, as I'd told her, isn't demanded, it's offered. And sometimes it's offered many times before someone is ready to accept it. Shadow stood up suddenly. His body tensed, and a low growl, not of aggression, but of warning, vibrated in his chest. We followed his gaze. There at the edge of the woods where the fence had the hole Luna had used to enter was a figure. A man, tall, camouflage uniform despite no longer serving. Medals hanging from his neck like trophies no one had asked for. Carlos Vargas, and in his hand, held with the same familiarity with which my father had held his hunting knife, was a gun. Luna, his voice came like a whip. Come here, now. Luna shrank. Her body, which had started to straighten during the morning, curled inward again. I saw her hands search for the empty leash, saw her eyes drop to the ground, saw 13 years of conditioned obedience try to drag her back. But she didn't move. No, she said. The word came out trembling, almost inaudible, but it came out. I'm not going back. Vargas stepped forward. Shadow growled louder but didn't attack. He was trained to wait, to hold the line between protection and aggression until I gave the order. Mr. Vargas, I said, my voice calmer than I felt. I'm in contact with Sheriff Morales. He's on his way. I suggest you lower your weapon. Vargas laughed. It was a laugh without humor, the kind of sound men make when they've forgotten how to truly laugh. The sheriff, that Mexican who can't read an arrest warrant. You don't scare me, Miss Cole. I know who you are. I know what you did to your father. What you did to that sick old man. My father did to himself what he is, I replied. I just stopped protecting him from the consequences. Luna, Vargas's shout made a pair of crows burst from the trees. This woman is using you. She's filling your head with lies. Dogs are tools, do you understand? Tools, and tools that don't work get discarded. Luna looked up. For the first time her eyes met her father's without trembling. Rusty isn't a tool, she said. And neither am I. Vargas raised the gun. He didn't aim at Luna, he aimed at Shadow. Then you'll learn the same way your mother learned, he said. When something matters to you, they take it away. Time slowed. I saw Vargas's finger on the trigger, saw the gun pointing at Shadow's chest. Saw 13 years of survival, of rebuilt trust, of lessons learned in darkness, about to end in an explosion of violence we hadn't chosen. And then I whistled. 2 short, 1 long. The whistle Duke had answered. Whistle Shadow knew. The whistle that meant come now, urgent. But it wasn't for Shadow, it was for Luna. She reacted without thinking. 13 years of practicing that whistle with Rusty, of using it in the dark when her father couldn't hear them, of communicating with her dog in the only language that belonged to the two of them. Her hand found the whistle I'd given her, brought it to her lips, and blew 2 short, 1 long. The sound cut through the air like a promise. And from the woods, like a ghost made flesh and fur and unbreakable loyalty, came Rusty. I don't know how he had escaped. Whether Luna had left a window open, whether he had broken the leash, whether he had simply decided he wouldn't die tied to a pole waiting for someone to decide his fate. Dogs, like people who have learned to survive, find ways. He was a large German shepherd, dark-coated with eyes that shone with an intelligence his owner had underestimated. And when he saw Vargas with the gun pointed toward where Luna stood, he didn't hesitate. He didn't attack, that's the important part. He didn't leap at Vargas with teeth seeking flesh. That's what Vargas would have done. That's what Vargas expected. Instead, Rusty interposed himself. Placed himself between the gun and Luna, between the violence and the girl who had learned to whistle in the dark, and growled. Not the growl of a rabid animal. The growl of a guardian, of someone who has decided there is a line that will not be crossed. Vargas fired. The sound was deafening. But the shot went wide. Rusty didn't move, didn't retreat, didn't give Vargas the excuse he needed to justify what he wanted to do, and before Vargas could adjust his aim, Shadow moved. Not to attack. Shadow never attacked without command. He moved to be seen. He emerged from behind me, his body marked by scars visible even from a distance, his shredded ear swiveling toward the sound of the gunshot, his blind eye looking in the wrong direction but his good eye fixed on Vargas with an intensity that made the man step back. Vargas recognized him. I saw it on his face, in the way his eyes widened, in how the gun trembled in his hand. You, he whispered, the puppy, the one from the fights. Shadow didn't growl. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. The dog he had sold to die, sitting at my side, alive, patient, and free. Lower your weapon, Mr. Vargas. Sheriff Morales's voice came from the edge of the woods where he appeared with his own gun drawn, accompanied by 2 more officers. "Lower your weapon now." Vargas looked around, at the gun pointed at him, at his daughter protected by her dog, at Shadow, the ghost of his past made flesh, and something in him broke, not with remorse, with defeat. He dropped the gun. Vargas was arrested, not just for threats with a firearm, but because Morales, who had listened to my call, who had investigated enough, who had decided that some stories deserved to be heard, had found records. Records of dog sales to fighting rings. Records of money he couldn't explain. Records that connected Vargas to a network I had helped dismantle years before in another country, in another war. Luna wasn't returned to her house. She was taken to a foster center while the family situation was investigated. But before she left, she came to say goodbye. Rusty was at her side, Awfulash, trusting that she wouldn't leave him. "Trust, always trust. Will I see you again?" she asked. "If you want," I said. "Duke's Run is always open, for dogs and for people who need to learn to whistle." Luna smiled. It was a small, uncertain smile, like a sprout that doesn't know if it's spring yet, but it was real. "Thank you," she said, "for not letting me go back alone." I hugged her. It was the first time I had touched her, and I felt her body tense for a second before relaxing, before letting her hands close on my back with the force of someone clinging to something they fear losing. "You're never alone," I whispered. "That's what the whistle means. That someone is listening. That someone will come. That you're not alone." That night, after they left, I sat on the porch with Shadow. The stars were clear, and the air smelled of pine and promises not yet fulfilled. "Do you think she'll be okay?" I asked Shadow, knowing I wouldn't get a verbal answer but receiving one anyway. A sigh, a shift of his body against my leg, a tongue that licked my hand with the certainty of one who knows that some wounds take time to heal, but they heal. I thought about my father in his psychiatric hospital room, still screaming at shadows. I thought about my mother in her diaries, in the silent bravery of someone who documents horror hoping someone will someday read. I thought about Duke, buried in frozen earth, and how now, in the meadow where I ran with the dogs, the grass grew tall and no one bled. And I thought about Luna, about how she had whistled, about how Rusty had answered, about how sometimes the bravest act isn't attacking the monster, but teaching someone younger that there is another way to be strong. Shadow stood up, walked to the edge of the porch, and looked at the woods. His tail moved once, twice. Then he sat, waiting, watching. I understood what he was telling me. There were more Lunas out there, more dogs tied to poles, more fathers with guns and uniforms and medals that didn't mean what they thought. And there were more whistles to give, more trust to build, more stories that wouldn't end in violence if someone was willing to sit in the darkness and wait. I took out my whistle, held it in my hand, feeling the cold metal against my skin. 2 short, 1 long. The sound traveled through the valley, bouncing off the trees, carrying with it everything I hadn't been able to say when I was 12. Everything Duke had known without words. Everything Shadow had learned in darkness and chosen to bring to light. And from the woods, from the meadow, from the kennels where dogs who had learned to trust again slept came the answers. Barks. Growls of recognition. The sound of paws running toward me, toward us, toward the promise that this time, there would be no picnic table. No knife. No frozen earth. Just the porch, the light, and hands that didn't bleed because no one hit them for crying. Shadow lay down at my feet. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in 29 years, I slept without watching the door, for Duke, for Shadow, for all the Lunas who don't yet know they can whistle, and for those who already did.